Hey, welcome back to the channel. I've been trying to do weekly uploads since starting booktube. Unfortunately, last weekend I wasn't able to do that. It was just a ridiculously hectic week, and I just could not find the time to get a video sorted out, which was a shame. But what that does mean is that I've had 2 weeks to try and make some progress on my reading, and I've finished a book I spoke briefly about in a previous video, and I've read another one. So that's good. That's very good for me. The first book that have finished recently is The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. I spoke briefly about this in a previous video. I think I was 50, 100 pages or so in. And despite what previous me had thought about the prospect of reading this book, I was I was kind of really into it, and kind of instantly empathetic and understanding of this main character, Stevens the butler. Yeah, I've now finished it. So to kind of just go over again what this book is broadly about. Stevens is a butler who works in essentially a stately home in the UK. And his master suggests he goes on a road trip, drives his nice car, and takes a few days in the countryside and has a drive around. And although he's initially reluctant to do it, his master insists, and he thinks actually what I could do while I do this, take a drive around, is actually go and visit an ex-colleague, Miss Kenton, who he's received a letter from recently, and he reads into that letter that she would potentially be open to returning to working at the house as she had done before. He's keen on that idea. So he decides to set off and go and visit her and try and see if that's something that she actually would like to do. And in the process of this journey, you learn about the areas he's exploring, but he's also starting to reminisce about things that have happened at the house in the past. And what I really love about this book is the way it's written, which is a stupidly simplistic thing to say. What I mean by that is this character of Stevens is fascinating to me. He is played by Anthony Hopkins in the movie, which I had never seen before, but I will watch now for sure. He is entirely kind of buttoned up, tunnel vision. The job is the only thing that matters, and I do my job incredibly well, and that's all that matters to me. To the extent that his relationships with his father and some other colleagues and other people kind of suffer for that. But he is very single-minded, and he comes across as quite repressed. There might be you get hints of things that he would like to do with his life or would have liked to have done with his life, but he hasn't allowed himself because he's had this eye on the prize the whole time. If I do my job to the T, and that's all that matters to me. And it ends up being, quite sad in places for that reason. He does not allow himself certain things in life because this is the only thing that matters to him. And that tunnel vision and that kind of absolute belief in the person who's giving him his orders means he is unable to see the wider context of some of the things that are happening with again, I don't want to trying not to spoil the book in case I can convince anybody who was on the fence to give this a go. There are some slightly unsavory things that seem to potentially be happening in the house that he is either unaware of or ignoring because, again, he's just focused on what needs to be done and what needs to be done well. But it's just it's such a beautifully written book. He is painted with these words just so incredibly well. And yeah, it is it's an emotional roller coaster of a book, I would say, in that respect. But yeah, highly recommend that. It is really very good indeed. The other book I've managed to read since the last video, it's not a huge surprise because it's not overly long. I featured this in my first ever video about 10 short books that I might want to try and read to keep up my momentum, and that is Of Mice and Men, by John Steinbeck. And I'm not really going to be able to add a huge amount that hasn't been said much more eloquently by other people, but this is magnificent as well. If you're not aware of the book, again, I don't want to spoil it, but broad strokes are, it's a book about two men who stick together through thick and thin, and they take up a new job on a ranch, sort of away from where they've been staying previously. One of the guys is kind of quite streetwise and has got the plan of what they're going to do. They're going to work the ranch. They're going to save up some money. They're going to get a place together and really start a life. These two friends. His friend is kind of childlike. Doesn't really always understand what's happening. He can't remember a lot of things, and he asks him to keep repeating over and over again about, for instance, what they're going to do in the future, and it gives him comfort. Without spoilers, what can I say? They go to this ranch. One of them gets into a situation that he doesn't quite know how to deal with, and it's about the fallout from that, really. That's very vague, but most of you will know what I'm talking about. I knew the plot, essentially, of this book before reading it. I knew ultimately what happened right at the end, but it did not stop me from thinking it was absolutely magnificent. I had never read this as a kid like a lot of people did, I think, in school. But yeah, just amazing, and I really, again, need to read some Steinbeck. Some more Steinbeck, because this was absolutely magnificent. So that's what I've been reading. What I thought I'd do for the rest of the video is just talk about some non-fiction books that I've picked up over the years and not got around to yet, that I'd be excited to hopefully read at some point in the near future. So here we go. We've got a few here. The first one is The Lost Continent by Bill Bryson, Travels in Small Town America. The reason that I have this and a number of other Bill Bryson books is Notes from a Small Island, one of his other books, a later book. I think this is his first, was one of my mum's favourite books. And I read it off the back of her recommendation when I was probably a late teenager, maybe in my early 20s, and I really enjoyed it. That book is about him driving around the UK, and some of his observations about the British way of life, which is really, really... I'll have to read it again, see how it holds up. I remember really enjoying it at the time, and like I say, it's one of my mum's absolute favourites. So again, over the years, I've been picking up, whenever I see a Bryson cheap, I pick it up and put it on the shelf. I've got loads now, and this is his first. It sounds like it will be similar to Notes from a Small Island, but in small town America. That suits me. I'm looking forward to giving that a go at some point. Next up, Adventures in the Screen Trade by William Goldman. I have read the follow-up to this, which he wrote many, many years after, called Which Lie Did I Tell? The reason I read that is because William Goldman, if you don't know, was a screenwriter. He wrote a lot of scripts for quite famous films, one of which is The Princess Bride, which is one of my absolute favourites, one of my favourite books as well. And that is covered in the second book. I think this came out in the mid-80s, before that film was made. But he also wrote things like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Marathon Man, a whole host of others. And he writes with a real humour, not only in The Princess Bride, for instance, but in the second kind of autobiography about his time in Hollywood, essentially. It was a really fun read, and it was full of anecdotes, but it also talked about the craft of screenwriting, which I'm interested in. I worked as a writer for a long time, not on films, but on magazines, what have you. But it's something that really interests me, and he kind of worked through some examples of how to heighten the script. That was really cool. So yeah, it was a really fun read, but also informative. So I'm looking forward to going back and reading the first one, which I absolutely will do at some point. Staying on the subject of writing and how to. I had to get this one in here as well. Stephen King's On Writing, which I know is lauded for being one of the best books for aspiring writers. I always have been an aspiring writer. Like I say, I used to work as a writer on magazines, but I always thought I would like to write a book at one day. I haven't quite got to it yet, but maybe one day. And this is something that I absolutely will read before I attempt it, if I ever do get round to it. This is supposed to be absolutely superb. I love King's fiction. I think my last video was about my journey through his novels so far. Excuse me. So yeah, that's one I will definitely get to at some point soon. Another is this book called Them: Adventures with Extremists by Jon Ronson. So Jon Ronson is a writer and journalist, and has also been a screenwriter, actually. This is a book I've wanted to read for, so long now, like an embarrassingly long time. So he had a TV show on Channel 4 here in the UK in 2001, I think it was, which I think this came out the same year. This kind of accompanied it, called Secret Rulers of the World. I think the show was called. I think it was 5 episodes, like documentary, short documentaries, where he would go and interview extremists, like extremist groups, and it was done for what is a very heavy subject. It was done with a light humour, but also reverence for the subject. It was really interesting to me. A similar approach to Louis Theroux, if you've seen any of his documentary stuff. So there are a number of Ronson books I'd like to read. There's 2 books of his newspaper columns, which are really, really funny. But this is obviously handling a slightly more heavy-hitting subject. And this is something I'd love to get to at some point soon as well. A couple more. Staying on the heavy side of things. This book is called The Unmapped Mind, and it's by Christian Donlan, who is a superb writer. He writes about video games for his day job, or part of his day job. And he is just a superb writer. I cannot tell you. Some of his articles are absolutely jaw-dropping. But this book is about the period in his life where he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and that is something that my mother suffered with, and it is a disease that can be absolutely brutal. There are varying kind of degrees and different types of MS, but yes, it's a subject that's very kind of close to me, having seen a close family member struggle with it. So that subject matter, kind of coupled with somebody who I know to be a superb writer, I think this will be a powerful one, and I'm looking forward to giving that a go as well. And then just to finish up, something a bit lighter, hopefully, although I think this goes to relatively dark places as well at times. This is It Never Ends by Tom Scharpling. Tom Scharpling is a radio host and TV writer and magazine writer, all sorts of different things. He hosts something called The Best Show, which has been going on for, I think, over 20 years at this point, which is essentially a call-in show with music, and he has like really interesting, funny topics every week, and gets people to call in on them. And then every now and again, his comedy partner, called John Worster, will call in as a different character from this fictional town of Newbridge. And they're all interwoven. They back reference. It's basically one of my favorite kind of audio things ever. The Best Show. It's absolutely superb. And Tom Scharpling's been doing that, as I say, for like 2 decades now. He also was heavily involved with the TV show Monk, if you've seen that, about a detective who suffers from obsessive compulsive disorder. That's a really good show, which I really like as well, and he had a huge hand in that. And he's done all sorts of other things. He's directed music videos. I basically just really like Tom Scharpling. He's an inspiration, and this is his autobiography, essentially. So yeah, that's something that I think I will really enjoy, and yeah, I will get to that soon, I think, because that's one I've been wanting to read ever since it came out. That's it. Are there non-fiction books that you could recommend to me that I absolutely should be reading, or is there a particular one of the ones I've shown today that you've read and you think I should bump up to the top of the list? Let me know in the comments, please. And I'll be back next time, hopefully next week, without a gap. But until then, take care, please, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.